Welcome to the February meeting, and we're going to start out with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we start on our agenda, we have a new member who I would like to welcome, Dave Nat, way down at the end. And if we're missing a few people, you can move in closer.
Sit here?
Yeah, or you could stay there.
Okay.
I think she's coming.
Okay.
But why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you?
Sure. My name is David Nat. I am a lifelong resident of Radnor Township. I grew up here. In the early 90s, I moved away for business school up in New York City, and I stayed up there for about 25 some years. Approximately about 5 years ago, I relocated back to my hometown to raise my 3 young children, and as well as come back. And my mother still lives here in the same house that I grew up with in Beaupre. And I have a commercial real estate background, and since getting my MBA from NYU Stern School of Business, I work for Citibank Realty Investment Advisors, acquiring and developing properties across the United States for a few years. I worked for a large real estate development company called Tishman Speyer Properties, where I worked for Jerry Speyer developing commercial office properties in Northern Virginia, primarily Fairfax County, Washington, D.C., and as well as New York City. And for about 15 some years, I worked for a pension fund called TIAA-CREF, where initially I was acquiring and developing properties internationally, primarily in Western Europe, Canada, and down in South America. And after the Lehman Brothers kind of went sideways, I kind of moved over to the domestic side of our business, where I ended up moving towards really on the asset side. So initially I ran a large portfolio of commercial office, retail, and the last 6-7 years of my tenure at Teachers, I ran a large multifamily property portfolio, primarily in Texas, South Florida, Philly, since I'm a Philadelphia guy, as well as New York City. So I'm adept at knowing the process of the entitlement process, doing all the issues involved with commercial real estate development, ownership, operations, financing, et cetera. So I'm pleased to be here.
Thank you very much and welcome.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is the minutes of the January meeting. They were on the table here in front of us when we arrived, if you had a chance to go over them. I'll give you a couple minutes to look at them. Any additions or corrections?
Second.
All those, it's been moved and second, we accept the minutes as written. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes are approved. Number 3 is the keeping of chickens, which I have to say I was surprised to see on our agenda. Hopefully, there's somebody here that can tell us about them. Is there somebody here from the Board of Health? Hi.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Andrew Foreman. I'm the chairman of the Radnor Township Board of Health. Last year, I believe in our March meeting, we finally gave a thought to an issue that's been of concern for some residents in Radnor Township for some time, and that's the raising of chickens. I don't know if the actual statement that we approved has come to your attention or if it's in the minutes this week, but if it's not, I can sort of.
Is that the one that starts out, chicken husbandry is
yeah.
a great part? Okay,
Yeah.
yes,
Okay,
it's
so
there.
I don't think we have to go through the whole thing, but basically, it just goes through some descriptions of communities in the area and over time that have raised chickens, and it's been a great safe, easy, and family thing to do. It provides eggs for families as well. And here in Radnor Township, it has not been approved by any of the boards, so we thought it would be a nice idea for the Board of Health to start the process because we're able to have experts on our board. We had a veterinarian who went through a lot of the literature about chicken husbandry and know it's safe and a very rewarding hobby for families. So I'm here tonight just to, I guess, answer questions. If there's other people in the audience, I'm sure who have a lot more expertise than I do on the details of this. We did give a recommendation for some of the minimum responsibilities of the owners of their properties to maintain their chicken coops and some of the responsibilities that we think are a good idea to safely keep these farm animals on domestic properties.
In reading over this, one thing I'm concerned with is who inspects them. How often are they inspected? Is there a yearly licensing fee? Because some of these, how would you really know if veterinary care is being obtained for sick birds?
You're absolutely correct. I mean, sounds like it could be a pretty costly endeavor for the township, and I think that you know, it's up to the owners to take responsibility for this. It's also probably a good idea to advise them to take some sort of course on how to raise chickens properly and care for these coops and the chickens properly. But the actual inspections, I'm assuming there'd be a fee for the license for the chickens, and hopefully that would cover some of the costs of an inspector coming out, maybe yearly, to see if they're maintaining their sanitary conditions.
Steve, has any thought been given to how the inspection process would be handled on this?
I don't believe it's been drilled down to that point at this time. I'm
Or
not
if
going
there
to.
would be an inspection process?
Right. I don't believe that's been discussed. I can't speak for our community development department, but I don't believe they're staffed at this point to take on that type of task.
One idea might be to look at Lower Merion, which has a chicken ordinance. The major difference would be that Lower Merion prohibits roosters for good reason. They'll go off any time, and so your neighbors are going to have an issue, I think, if you have a rooster, unless you live on a 20-acre farm. So anyway, it might be a good idea to look at the Lower Merion ordinance to see, or find out from Lower Merion how things are working out.
Historically, wasn't there a time when many municipalities actually legislated against keeping chickens and other similar types of birds in residential areas? That's just my recollection anyway, and that's why it is somewhat controversial when you want to reintroduce something which some folks feel is an imposition on their neighbors, and not to mention the expense to the township. And once a year inspection isn't going to get the job done, I don't think. I really don't. I mean, can they slaughter the chickens if they want? I mean, I see the eggs fine, I guess, if they pass, if they're pass whatever rules have been in effect for quite some time now on how eggs have to be treated before they can be released for sale. I don't know what the same rules would apply here.
Yeah,
but I think there's a lot of concerns. This sounds like one of these great ideas, until you start thinking about it a little bit, it becomes less than a great idea.
Hey, Kath, are we supposed to be looking for an ordinance on this tonight? No.
No, I think, Steve, what are you looking for? Some of
So-
our thoughts?
Yeah, Mr. Kuchansky is not able to be here. I believe this is just one of the first steps where we go to our advisory commissions and ask them for their thoughts on an ordinance of this type. So it would be any recommendations you may have.
Okay.
We'll note them in the minutes, and that could
And
travel
then
on.
it goes from there.
So as the Board of Health, we were sort of on the side of trying to figure out the safety from an infectious standpoint for community residents, as well as, I guess some amount of noise pollution and respect for neighbors and things. But we tried to keep it very general, where the Board of Commissioners had asked us when we first brought this up to them to try to keep it sort of general and let present to the Board of Commissioners what would be a way to start this process. So a lot of it had to do a lot with the science of salmonella and and keeping the how to dispose of the waste, or how to keep the waste for use in gardens and things. and just the safety in general. So that was the part of the Board of Health had handled, and we were kind of I guess, the first to bring this to the Board of Commissioners. It seems like it may have come up at meetings prior for the board, but they have other, more pressing duties. So we started at the board level, Board of Health level, to maintain that it is a safe practice, and it would be obviously also, I think, good for the township because of some of the other issues, recycling of the waste to use in gardens and things like this. And so I think it's a first step. I don't think we had any of the details down, but we are looking for input from other commissions in the township to help us find a, kind of a reasonable legislation around this to give people the opportunity to keep chickens.
Or
Not
I
that
think-
people don't keep chickens
Are
already
the
in the township.
chickens,
Yeah.
are they kept in a structure?
There's a coop for chickens that's, relatively easy to build or easy to buy. And the chickens are really free roam around the property that's fenced in during the daytime, and then they usually kind of migrate into their warmer areas in the evening.
I think two things that I would think that has to go in this is, I think anyone who wants to do it needs to take some kind of health classes similar to what restaurants have to do, And I would think you would need a semi-annual inspection. And I think the fees that would be tacked on to that, other than a license to buy it, I think that each time they come out for inspection, they'd be charged a fee for each inspection, at least to cover the costs, because more so now, when there's might be a few or a couple, you can't hire someone just to do chicken inspections. I don't think. If you do, I'll take that job.
Another thing that's concerning is the Philadelphia Zoo has chickens, and when they have 5-degree weather or 10-degree weather, they have to put them inside. They can't leave them in their outdoor structures. Also, you can't take a vacation if you have chickens unless you have people that are going to take care of your chickens. So there's a lot of details here. I think that this is a very complicated, it's more complicated than I got a baby duck for Easter. So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I don't see where there's a fee. I'm looking at K at the bottom. It just says if a township resident wants to keep chickens, they have to notify the township in writing and so on. I don't see anything in here about a fee. And since inspections we'll have to, common sense says you're going to have to inspect. There should be some charge, perhaps even an annual charge, to help defray those expenses.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I think there has to be a public education component to this because it's on both sides. The people who are choosing to exercise this option will probably know all the things they need to know. It's the surrounding community that needs to support the projects by being educated. I think, I'm not sure where that piece will come into play, but I think people need to understand what's happening. And be brought up to speed. And by comparing against ordinances that are in other similar communities, I think that's helpful. And I think we're at the early stage, and I think the health concerns are the main concerns. And if the Board of Health is supportive of this, then certainly I think the Planning Commission should also be.
I just like that.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'd like to add just one other comment. It's like, if you have chickens in your backyard, it's also going to cause some other predators that are going to come into your yard, like foxes, raccoons, or whatever is going to feed on chickens. So you have to understand the other ramifications of ownership.
All right. Is there anybody else?
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Dr. Capuzzi actually was she's a veterinarian, was actually the author of this ordinance, and she's just walked in, so if there's any other kind of questions, they can be directed a lot to her too as well. I have it here if you need it.
Okay, great.
But a lot of the concerns were over. We didn't really mention much about the inspection and how
Okay.
it would work. And you reviewed other townships.
Yeah,
proposals,
and other townships, I mean.
Could you introduce yourself, please? Could you introduce yourself, please?
I'm Dr. Joan Capuzzi, and I'm on the Board of Health. So some other townships do regular inspections, some don't, some do fee assessment, some don't. It's sort of across the board. I reviewed about 10 or 15 different township ordinances around the country, and There's no general rule of what they all do. As far as you're concerned about it's complicated, I understand what you're saying. It's actually not that complicated. Chicken tending is really easy. It requires 5 to 10 minutes a day. If somebody wants to invest the time, they can. If not, they don't need to get chickens. As far as do they need to get somebody to take care of their chickens, yes, just like they do with their cats, dogs, anything else. And that's their prerogative if they want to do that. But yeah, it's an added responsibility. And I don't think that's a township problem. I think that's a owner problem if they want to take on the responsibility of getting chickens. I do think public education would be a good idea. I think a public education program would be a good idea. Whether or not it be made a requirement or an optional thing, I think is, I think how different people want to get their education, I think should sort of be their prerogative. There's so much out there that they can read about online. Pickering Valley Feed walks people through the whole process. It's not that complicated. I've had chickens. It's not that complicated. The waste disposal is not complicated. The feeding's not complicated. There are food can be ordered in regular or organic online. It can be gotten up here at Delchester Feed or at Pickering Valley. This is a great place for people to have chickens. It's very, very easy. As far as main concern that you mentioned about disease, it's sort of a non-issue. I mean, this township is so flooded with birds, and this isn't really any greater risk than the risk we encounter just in our daily life. If people are cleaning their eggs, that's the main thing. You have to clean the eggs well. You have to brush them. If somebody has a second sink other than the kitchen sink, like a pantry or a laundry sink, that they can clean them in, and with vinegar, all the better. Hot water, all the better. And taking the eggs every day too is also important in terms of them not the porous shells, absorbing anything. The predators, yeah, and let me just say one other thing about the, concern that we've discussed before, avian influenza, and that's probably more what's on everybody's mind. It's a non-issue. It's only been identified in like 7 countries, and it's not on our continent. I think somebody in Canada a couple of years ago, it was isolated and they were coming from Asia. The disease is not transmissible between people. It's a non-issue. They're more likely, if somebody were to get avian influenza from a bird from Asia that was a flying bird, not chickens in anybody's residence. There is no avian influenza in these chickens, the H1N1 strain, the pathogenic strain. As far as predators, the predators are already here. They're all over the place. Chickens are not going to increase the predators. The predators have ample availability to squirrels, chipmunks, everything. This area is rich with predators, rich with prey and predators, rich with water sources. I mean, there are just foxes, raccoons swarming the area, and chickens are not going to make a bit of a difference.
Did you have an opportunity to read over Lower Merion's ordinance?
I did, yeah.
And how long have they had it, do you know?
I know it was in effect at least 7 years, but I can find out. I
Okay.
can find out the answer to that.
And do you happen to know if they charge a registration fee or do an inspection or
I'll
anything
check.
like that?
I'll
Okay.
check. I don't think they do regular
Yeah.
inspections.
I'm not so worried about the person raising the chickens. I'm worried about once the township gets involved with it, the administrative end.
And my thought about that was that this should not be a burden on the township. I think it would be an unreasonable burden on the township, and I don't think it's a necessity. And I think the way I had worded it is inspections, unannounced inspections can be done. But, like, for example, if a neighbor calls, or if there's some sort of, or if, let's say, police officers come to a property for another reason and say, oh my God, I see this big pile of manure, we gotta get. So if a problem is identified, I don't think routine inspections need to be done. It's, for the most part, pretty much a no-brainer to raise chickens in a responsible and healthy way. And we're only talking 4 to 6 chickens. It's
Okay.
not gonna be a flock,
All right, thank you.
okay?
Any questions from the board? All right. Sarah, you wanted to make a comment?
I'm Sarah Pilling, and I live at 29 Garrett Avenue. I want to tell you about how a program has developed in many small towns of New Jersey. The residents who want chickens have gotten together. They've formed a committee. It's mandatory education. They have 2 women who are extremely knowledgeable who do the education. And once you do get the education, then you get to get your certificate. They are serving as the inspectors.
And that-
They're reporting.
that's a volunteer?
It's all volunteer.
Okay.
They meet, they're supporting each other, they're able to buy their feed in larger amounts. They've gotten a local store in the various communities to carry it, so they don't have to go so far. They're turning it into something, it's community building, and because they're supporting and educating each other, and they have a way to get information. My chicken isn't looking very well, or got a little frostbite, what do I do? And they have answers. I would not think of having roosters, because who is my neighbor at 3 o'clock in the morning when it's 2 miles away and the rooster is doing, you were talking about
Solo
the
act, yeah.
You were talking about the eggs. I think it should be in it that eggs, you may not sell your eggs. There are people lining up at the back doors of people because these eggs are being fed non-antibiotic food. They're all natural. They're kept well. They're clean. They're free-range eggs. And you can trade. You go away on vacation. Susie comes over and feeds your chickens every day and takes all the eggs that are produced while you're away. It is not a problem. There are people who actually want to do that. The cold, you mentioned the cold. There are breeds of chickens, primarily the Old English breeds, that are more than capable of staying warm. They have a process where at the end of the summer they molt and they begin to look like picked chickens. That is so they can grow new feathers, which are protein, so that they can get through the winter. They don't lay when they're molting, but they are more than capable of being outside in their coop. Their coop can't be tight, 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 because then you get moisture and then they can get sick. If you do what's called a deep layering, composting layering in the coop in the winter, so you put down the straw and you get some chicken poop, you put down some more straw and you build up a layer which is working its way down. It produces heat. You give a chicken scratch at the end of the day, which is protein, which increases their body heat. It's very rare that a chicken will have frostbite. Predators, as was said, the predators are all around us. We have foxes who walk up and down Garrett Avenue all the time. We're about as dense a neighborhood as can be. We have raccoons. But if you've protected your chickens, they're not going to be able to get in. If you let them roam the end of the driveway, you might have a problem during the day. But as the sun goes down, the chicken instinct is to go into its coop. So, I mean, I think that there are many of us who are very concerned about the food we are eating anymore. And I think it's one of the reasons chickens have become popular. And there are 25 major cities in the United States, like Chicago and Miami and Phoenix and Austin, Texas, who have allowed chickens because they see the advance. I want to take a minute to tell you a little story about that. I'm now a climate reality leader. And the city of Austin, Texas, will give each household 2 chickens, educate them, They get a $75 rebate to build a coop. They have a compost pile that goes along with it, and the city of Austin, Texas predicts that by 2040, they will have reduced 90% of their organic waste from the landfills. And of course, organic waste is broken down anaerobically, and it produces methane, and methane is 80 times stronger than CO2. So it sounds strange, but having chickens is actually a mitigating factor in climate change. I would love to have this wonderful woman, Gwen Bailey, come and talk. She's the leader, and there are little towns that are much denser than Radnor, more like Garrett Hill or Little Chicago, where they now have active chicken programs, and it's all over the place in South Jersey and Camden County. And it's all volunteer-led, volunteer followed. Education is really important, and they've made friends they never had before. So that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else in the audience that would like to speak? No? Any comments? I'm sorry, Doctor, did you?
Yeah, I'm sorry, mention one more thing. And Sarah, that's great information. Doesn't she make everybody want to have chickens? Very good advocate for chickens. And I think that, an education plan may be bringing Gail out. You had told me about Gail before, or maybe establishing like a mainline school night class that could either be optional or required. I think that's a decision that could be made later on, whether it would be required or optional. As far as the cold goes, and yes, there are breeds that are hardier, but even the little bantam breeds are pretty much do okay in the cold. And you can hang a light in the coop. You can put a tarp over it. There are different ways to preserve the heat, and the chickens have high body temperatures anyway, so they're not as prone to frostbite. The roosters more on their combs and wattles if you have roosters. So segue to roosters. I put in here possibility of a single rooster if somebody wants roosters. Some people like roosters. Some people like the sound. Obviously, it can be an issue with neighbors, and that would be an individual choice in an individual neighborhood. But it can work, but I think it would be a special circumstance where the neighbors are okay with it. And
You don't really need a rooster to have the eggs and have the hen.
Fertilized eggs, yeah, but no, not to have eggs. And they don't make a difference in the frequency of egg laying. They lay a single egg every 20 to 22 hours, regardless of whether there's a rooster or not. And as Sarah was saying, this is just a big, huge plus of eggs. I don't have chickens right now. I do not buy anything other than free-range organic eggs for my kids. I think the regular eggs are so unhealthy. I think there are so many chemicals in them. They're fed food that's just not healthy food, and the eggs are sprayed with all sorts of chemicals, formaldehyde, to prevent the possibility of salmonella, and that's not something that we want to be ingesting. So I think for health reasons, these are just much better eggs. And of course, a secondary ethical issue too, the big egg production facilities really keep these chickens, these hens, in terrible condition, and I wouldn't even want to give them my money, these egg producers. But again, I will not feed my kids regular eggs that are not organic and free range.
I think we're not going to be making a decision on this tonight. We're just getting input, because I think most of the board I know nothing about chickens.
Okay. And then as far as the enclosures, we made recommendations for, how far they have to be from a neighbor's property, and then, of course, that's something that can be negotiated with a neighbor as well.
Okay,
All right.
great, thank you.
The one thing I would say is, I don't know if I'm as in support of having the rooster because of the noise, but also, I think it's not really a zoning or land use thing for us to say negotiate with the neighbors. I think we have to kind of have a
Make a
stance,
decision.
and
Yeah.
that's the stance that makes sense for the town. And this, based on the neighbors, I don't think we can go down that road.
I agree
don't
with
think we
you.
could be as informal as that.
All right. Any other comments from the board? Okay. Yes, I'm planning on it. Steve, what I would suggest is that, obviously, this needs to be looked into further. It probably would be a good idea to get a copy of Lower Merion's ordinance, since they're a township that's similar to us. And also, I think the local community of chicken raisers would be a great way of handling the inspection on this, and some of the other questions that we had, and perhaps that should be looked into also.
Will do.
So they are my comments. Are there any other comments?
Yeah, I agree with what you said, Kathy. I think volunteers could be a very helpful source, but maybe there's a way to require people to maintain documentation and upload it or send it to the township, and then you can kind of spot check them. And then if someone has a complaint, you can pull their documents and see if they've been doing what they're supposed to do. Make it kind of a inspect as needed approach rather than spending a lot of
Regular
resources
inspection.
to inspect things that don't need to be inspected. And then, obviously, after a certain amount of time, you'd be able to have a better idea of how things are going.
Okay. Any other comments from the board? No? I assume we don't need to take any sort of vote on this other than send you our comments.
That's correct, Madam Chairman.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, so we'll move on to the next item.
Kathy, do we each individually send comments?
No,
How
no,
does
no,
that
I
work?
meant
Are you going
Steve
to
is-
summarize?
No, Steve is doing that.
So,
Oh, you're going to summarize what we said?
Trish will take the basic comments, put them in bullet points,
Okay, great.
and they'll be part of the minutes, and they can also be given to the Board of Health, and then they can move on to wherever
Okay,
they
so we
to
don't
go.
need a memo or anything?
No.
Okay,
No,
great.
ma'am.
All right, number 4 is 230 Ashwood Road. Is there somebody here to speak to that?
Hi there, my name is Keith Hackey, and I'm the landowner at 317 Hilldale. And this is Jack, our engineer, and we're here to, we want to improve our lot, basically. You want to go ahead?
My name's Jack Robinson from JMR Engineering, and we prepared this plan for Mr. Hack and the owners of the property known as Lot 1 in this plan. The only reason it's before you is a lot line change between two property owners. So I think in the past, I've been here before when it was one property owner, and we actually didn't even need to come. But I think because we have two owners involved, we are before you. And the proposal is quite simple. We're just proposing a lot line change between Lot 1 and Lot 2. And the driving factor here was really one thing. The driveway, the existing driveway for Lot 2 was essentially intruding on Lot 1. And we're just here to rectify that. So if you can...
Now, if you could point out which is Lot 1 and which is Lot 2.
So Lot 1 is the larger lot, and Lot 2 is the smaller lot with the house on it. Kind of grayed out there, but there's a home right here, and that's where Mr. Hack lives.
That's currently there. Is anything going to be constructed on the other property?
Eventually. It's a vacant lot, and the owner of that lot can't even settle on the lot until we address this driveway issue. And then I think they were going to come back with a grading plan to build a home on that lot.
Okay. Are they planning on further subdividing that other lot?
No. No, there's no way to either.
The other question I have is, this is listed as 230 Ashwood, and I think the plans say 55
Yeah.
Ashwood?
When we first
Which is
got
it?
we first got this, we thought it was lot 55. There was no address for that lot. And and then we found out there is an address, but it wasn't posted anywhere,
Okay,
so.
so
was
it's
just-
230?
Yes, yes, we believe, I think that the township looked that up.
Yeah.
It wasn't in the tax records, though. So we did some research, I think that's what the correct address should be, and will be. So, yeah, that is the simplicity of this. We are also increasing the lot size for Mr. Hack in the rear as well. You can see this thick dash line. So his lot is going to get larger, not only in the front to accommodate his driveway, but also in the rear. And that's essentially the plan.
All righty. Roger, do you have any comments?
No, just some of the comments that were in my letter that were basically housekeeping items, and we've discussed with their engineer, and I don't believe there's an issue with straightening out those comments.
No.
Okay, all that would be done?
Yes.
Okay.
There is one waiver noted,
Which is?
which we've requested in the past. Just given the simplicity of this, it's number 1 in the letter, the subdivision land development section regarding noting man-made features within 500 feet of the property. It just seemed like a lot of work for a lot line change, so customarily we ask for that waiver.
Any questions or comments from the board? This end? No? This end? Do we agree with giving the waiver? Which we normally do? Yes? All right. Any questions or comments from the audience? If not, is there a motion from the board?
I move that we approve the application.
Is it seconded? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
One thing, and
As
we
long as he
agree
does the
with
things that
granting,
the staff wants him to do.
Yes.
Things listed?
and we agree with granting the waiver, correct?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Next item is Ardent Credit Union, number 5.
Kathy, I'm going to recuse myself.
Okay, thank you.
How's everyone doing? Dave Falcone here on behalf of the applicant. I'm just going to quickly introduce where the property is and what we are proposing to do, then I'm going to turn it over to the consultants because we are just here for a sketch plan review. And we've got review letters from Roger and Amy, and I know that our consultants have spoken to them. But the property is located at 516 West Lancaster Avenue. It's the old McDonald's up on 30, kind of next to Gallagher Road, not quite, but real close. We are proposing to redevelop the site and make it a bank, credit union, the Ardent Federal Credit Union on that site. We have lots of existing conditions there. Some of them are non-compliant with your ordinance. Some of them will remain, but I think most will get better to the extent they do change. So I've pre-marked a few exhibits. I'll hand them out to you all now and then turn it over to our consultants to walk through the review letters. Again, we are just here for a sketch plan review, and we'll be back during the formal land development process.
And Kathy, while Dave's passing that out, I just want to call your attention to comment 5 in my letter, which was put in there inadvertently, so you can delete comment 5 from my letter.
My name is Carl Leitner from Barry Eisen Associates.
Excuse me, one sec.
I'm sorry.
Comment 5, is that on page 2, the minimum curb radii?
Yes, it is.
Okay. I'm sorry, go ahead.
We're the civil engineers on the project. We also have representatives from Ardent Credit Union today and Lamacchia, who's the architect on the project. Just to give you a quick overview of the site, now that you all have handouts, I'm going to start off with A3, section 3, and that's the existing features plan. Just to give you an idea of what the current property looks like.
Mr. Leitner, could you please speak into the microphone?
Oh, I'm sorry.
So they can
Yeah.
record you? Thank you.
I have a handheld mic here, if you'd rather use that.
I can lean into this one,
Okay.
it'll be okay. On the property, we currently have the McDonald's building. I believe it's 3,200 square feet. We've got an entrance drive on the western side of the property, an exit on the eastern side of the property. What we propose to do is remove the building itself, replace it with a 2,500 square foot building. Actually, it'll be reducing the building size by about 700 square feet. We will be thanks to the comment letters, we will be moving the eastern driveway a little bit to the west to get it further away from Gallagher Road, and also to provide a smoother exit for vehicles in the drive-through lanes. Other than that, we will be reducing some of the impervious in the southern end of the site, replacing it with likely a landscaped area. And currently, all the stormwater goes to the southern side of the site, so it'll give an opportunity to get it through some vegetation and clean it up a little bit. Are there any particular concerns on the letters? Do you want me to go through them point for point?
Not necessarily. Is there anything here that you cannot abide by?
Most of the waivers that we'll be applying for are existing non-conforming, specifically the distance between the two driveways on the property. There is existing features within 500 feet of the site. I mean, we'll obviously provide all the information we can about the neighboring properties, but 500 feet of the site may not, probably will not help the planning process very much.
How about the side yards? Are you going to be within code on the new side yards and your
As I mentioned
rear and
before, it's
front?
existing non-conforming.
But you're tearing it down.
We certainly won't be making it worse.
But you're tearing it down. So why can't you work with the new setbacks?
The drive aisles in the parking areas would not fit if we were to follow the current setbacks.
I have
The
a
setbacks aren't for the parking, they're for the structure.
Yeah.
So how does that?
The building meets the setbacks.
Okay, the building
Yes.
does?
Yes.
All right. That was my concern.
Oh, I'm
when you
sorry, I
tear a building
misunderstood.
down.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so it's primarily driveway.
Yeah. Let me just flip through my letters real quick here. I will point out on the Gilmore letter, comment number 4, there was a suggestion that we reverse the traffic on the site. We've since talked to Amy about that, discussed our concerns about how the drive-through works and how that would actually impede what we're trying to do as far as having an ATM connected to the building. You know, driver doors are on the left-hand side of the car. The drive-through kind of makes sense the way it's laid out. We're pretty much matching the existing idea of how McDonald's had their thing set up. So number 4, we'll be reducing the 200 feet minimum between driveways, and we'll be keeping the current counterclockwise direction of traffic. To answer your question about waivers, I believe we'll need a waiver for access to arterial roads rather. That is the only access point for the site. I'm now on the Gannett Fleming letter. Comment number 1 says that we will not need a waiver, but further down the line, subdivision and land development, comment number 8 does say that we need a waiver for that one.
Excuse me, going back to Gilmore's letter, or memorandum, it would be the third page, general comments about the sidewalk. Do you agree with her recommendation? The recommendation that replacing the 7-foot sidewalk to provide a grass verge?
Yeah, we'll be able to give a vegetative section between the curb and the sidewalk.
So you
No
agree to do
problems with
that? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Hi. Did you have a question or a comment? If we could use the mic and please identify
Hi
yourself.
Kyle Edwards. I'm with the Lamakia Group. I'm working with Ardent Credit Union as the design project manager for the construction, the general construction management team. I just did want to point out.
No, last section, section 4.
And would you like a handheld mic, or do you want to lean over into the other
Once I
mic?
get this position, I'm going to run.
All right.
Right over. There we go. So I just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about the proposed design of the credit union. This is a branch that will match an existing facility that Ardent Credit Union has in Oaks. And some of the materials, all of the materials would match the Oaks branch. We've got a combination of stone, a natural stone that's locally quarried. We're proposing fiber cement board siding and a sheet metal, a standing seam sheet metal roof. Lots of glass and an entry tower.
Questions or comments from the board?
Thank
All
you.
right, thank you. What is your projected percentage of impervious?
I believe our site plan currently calls out 80%. That's a reduction from the existing 92, but we will be further reducing it by adding that grass strip along the road.
Can you get it down any further?
We have had conversations about this. We actually are showing an excess of parking. I believe we are required, is it 25 spaces? Required 20 spaces. We're showing 5 extra spaces. I forget the exact numbers. We can reduce and remove those spaces in order to reduce the impervious, yes.
And put them in if the requirement should show up for them? In
If
other
the
words, you
requirement-
keep them in storage, basically, but impervious, or pervious until you would need them if you were to need them?
Yeah, we could do that.
Okay. How's
We'd
the
probably
township
remove the ones
feel about
that
that?
mean the less on the south end of the site. And yeah,
Mhm.
if we need them in the future, we can certainly put them in.
There's another opportunity that we have by shifting this drive over. We can pick up some additional impervious area over on the east side of the property as well.
Yeah, I would appreciate you getting that number down as far as possible, perhaps getting it to what it's supposed to be, which I think was, you noted here, 70%?
It's 70 is the required, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. When we put together the sketch plan, we made an effort. We were able to, like I said, to drop it 12%. But through a little bit more conversation, we've discovered that we can actually do better.
Good.
So we will make an effort.
We'll look for that then.
With respect to the parking, do you feel you need those 5 extra spaces based on your other location?
Yeah, so one of the functions or the features of the facility here is to have seminars, after-hour seminars for staff training, also for, member financial seminars and that sort of thing. So there will be, would need those additional parking spaces for that purpose.
We've spoken with the client who's back there. We really don't think we need the excess parking. We think we need what is required by code. That would have been
Oh,
excessive.
so what's required would meet your needs?
We believe it would,
Okay.
yes.
Oh, okay.
So the additional 5 spaces would have been kind of
You
worst-case
could
scenario,
bank
but
them,
we
basically.
don't think we need them on a
Okay.
regular basis, yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
How does the township feel about that, banking the extra 5 spots?
Madam Chairman, so I'm not a fan of over-designing parking if it's not needed. So if they can meet our requirements and it's adequate for their use, I would be fine with that. I would concur.
All right.
Well, I agree that that would be an improvement over the existing site, as you're pointing out. In addition, if you're able, in the rear, if you have area to do additional stormwater management, would that be a potential, I guess we'd have to look and see what benefit it would be to the township. Would that be something you'd be willing to partner on with the township if?
Regina, if I can add to
Sure.
that, they're required to do stormwater management on this because it's a redevelopment.
Okay.
They actually submitted that with the plan. That's typically not part of a sketch plan, and I really didn't want to get into the weeds with stormwater management before they actually came in with their actual land development plan. But they've submitted the system and calculations, and it's adequate to serve the site. Which
Great, thank you.
there's no stormwater management on that site
Right.
now.
Right, yeah, so we will be improving. If you look just about here, this rectangle here is our underground basin that we plan to help mitigate the rate controls.
And could you design that for, assuming that you would eventually put in all the parking spots, even though you're holding back maybe 5 of them now? So in other words, design for the maximum?
It's actually currently designed for that.
Okay,
I
good.
just,
Just wanted to make sure of
yeah,
that.
I don't have to reduce it at this point.
Perfect, okay.
Yeah, I don't really see the need to hold on to those 5 spots if you don't envision needing them and you're meeting the code. I think you should just move forward with the required parking, and as long as it meets your needs.
Sure.
So do you have space along the property line to add a buffer zone or a planting strip between those 2 properties? The property on the right and to the left?
To the right, there's a retaining wall there. We may not want.
There's a retaining wall?
Yeah, we may not want to add too much of a root system. But to the left side, yeah, there is currently a concrete strip there. It's not quite wide enough for a sidewalk, so there may be some potential there.
Well, you said you were going to adjust the driveways in and out, so you'd have more space there for a planting strip when we were talking about reducing the impervious?
With the property on the east, that's a retaining wall between the 2?
Right here.
Correct, yeah.
Didn't you just say you could put some more green stuff in there?
What I was talking about was Lancaster Avenue. Per that previous comment on the Gilmore letter, the last comment there asked about a planting strip along the Lancaster Avenue. That's what I
No,
was referring to.
but when we were talking about realigning driveways, you pointed out
Oh, I'm sorry.
on the
yeah.
east side
Yeah, so. let me
about a
just-
wider
triangle,
planting
yeah.
strip.
Yeah, I'll sketch it real quick. So this happens. We can actually pick up additional green space over here.
Okay.
Kathy, there's 2 things that you're discussing there, a planting strip and a buffer, which are 2 different separate items. I would caution about too much of getting into a buffer on the front side of that property because of the site
Of the view,
distances
yeah.
required with Lancaster, and that's a very tough turn coming in and out of Gallagher Road there as it is now. So I would caution on putting too much.
Good point. Well, you folks can work that out.
Sure.
All right. Any other comments or suggestions from the board? No? Any questions or comments from the audience? Now, do you want to vote on a sketch plan or just our thoughts?
No, you're just required to give them your recommendations.
So I guess that is reduce the impervious, and you could bank 5 of the spots, but design your water retention for, assuming all the spots are there, which you said you're doing.
Mhm.
Any other points from the board?
Just accept the verge that's recommended by Jim.
Yes.
The verge that was recommended by Gilmore would also be part of the recommendation.
Okay,
Great,
great,
thank you
thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you. Thanks.
We've spoken about it a lot before. It's designed for it, and if the need should arise, they would be required to put them in. But they don't have to put them in from the beginning if they don't feel they need them. All right, next item. First Resource Bank, zoning hearing application.
Hi, good evening. Debbie Shulsky here on behalf of the applicant. Also with me this evening is Glenn Marshall, representative from First Resource, our professional engineer, Chuck Dobson, and our traffic consultant, Guy DiMartino. And we're here tonight for your review of and hopefully a recommendation on a pending zoning hearing board application that we submitted, scheduled for hearing on February 15th. We're before you tonight because it's ultimately going to lead to a land development, so we'll be back before you, obviously, again at the time after the plans have been fully engineered and the land development has been submitted. Just to give you a very brief overview, and then I'm going to have Glenn give you a little bit of background about the bank. The property's situated at 321 West Lancaster Avenue. It was previously approved and actually renovated for a medical office, but they never ended up occupying the building. So First Resource is proposing to redevelop the site for a bank with a drive-through. And as I mentioned, there are certain variances that we submitted for. 3 of them, they're all dimensional variances. One is for an increase in the height of the fence, which is along the rear of the property to provide a better buffer for the properties in the rear. And again, our engineer can walk you through the site plan in a moment. The other one is for variance from the location of the sign on the building itself being higher than 15 feet on the placement of the building, but the area of the sign and all other features of the sign code are met. And then the third one is to allow for a drive-through lane that has a 3 stacking as opposed to your ordinance requirement of 12. And Glenn Marshall from First Resource is going to give you a little bit of background on the changes in the banking industry today and why, from an operational standpoint, he feels that's more than sufficient. And then we also had a traffic consultant review the stacking as well from the circulation pattern, and he feels that it's sufficient as well.
Good evening, everyone. Banking has changed a lot in the last few years, especially with respect to people going to the bank. Our business plan is based on remote deposit capture and using your smartphone. This last year, we had 60% of our daily transactions come into us electronically. So we've done a traffic study on the branch and the drive-up, and we know from our existing 2 locations that we typically have 1 car. In Exton, we occasionally have 2 cars of stacking. And the ordinance, the way it's written, which was appropriate, you know, when we cashed our checks and we left the factories, just doesn't work right now with the current things that are going on in the banking. People don't go to the bank. They just don't. You need to have a location in a geographic area to access that market. Obviously, we would have 1 location in the main line. We like this location. We like being on Route 30. The days of having a huge number of branches on every corner are done. The number of branches in this country has gone down by 10% in the last 5 years, and will probably go down by another 10% in the next 5. You know, every center that you see that wants to put a bank pad, they're going to be empty. That's just not what's happening right now in banking. So as you get into smaller micro sites, this fits that perfectly. We think we can do the circulation that we need, the stacking we need. We're proposing to tear off part of the building and square it a little bit. We're going to reduce the number of square feet in the building. It is out of compliance right now with parking and square feet. We're going to bring it back. Our coverage is 50%. So we're really just looking for a little modernization in the stacking to what's really happening right now in the industry.
Chuck, do you want to just give them a very brief overview on the plan itself?
Certainly. Good evening, Chuck Dobson, Inland Design. We're the engineer for the applicant. As Debbie indicated, the site's at 321 West Lancaster Avenue. It's just shy of a half an acre, about 0.43 acres. It is located majoritively in the CO zoning district. The plan we have on the screen right now is an existing conditions and demolition plan. Effectively, you can see that they have the bulk of the existing building will stay. There's an existing, it looks like an add-on, that will be removed. There's a concrete patio to the rear of the building, and that will basically removed and turned, sorry about that, and that will be removed and turned, actually incorporated to the new building itself. A couple of features to note, there is a single access here on the western side of the site. There is a fairly large asphalt parking area in the front yard currently. and there's another asphalt parking area to the rear of the property as well. There are a number of spruce trees along the eastern property line, which will probably have to come down just basically because of the improvements that we're proposing. We have engaged not only an arborist, but a landscape architect to help us out with that, and obviously go through the Shade Tree Commission when we get to that point. The proposal is shown on sheet 2, and that proposal shows we're going to maintain the current point of the current driveway location at the western edge of the site, but that will then turn into an exit only. We propose to add a new entrance driveway along the eastern property line, and that'll basically allow us to have a through lane, a bypass lane, and then we'll have drive-through stacking lane to the left of that bypass lane. The amount of impervious coverage is just going to be about the same. We're right at about 50% now, and we're going to be right at 50% when we're done. We recognize that the ordinance requires us to be there, so we shouldn't have any issues in that regard. We do plan, with this plan proposes to maintain 2 hackberry trees along West Lancaster Avenue, and there's going to be proposed 1 standard parking space and 1 handicap parking space in the front. That's really about it. It's pretty simple. As Glenn indicated, the site is like kind of a microsite. They've done their analysis, and based on our analysis, we think we can make this happen. So,
Is there a rear entrance to the building? Because the majority of your parking is in the back, and I'm wondering if just those 2 spots in the front would be enough.
there is a rear entrance to the building, and as Glenn indicated, the building's going to be pretty significantly rehabilitated, so entranceways will be part of the new schematic for the building layout itself.
Then I assume that is a public entrance way in the back.
It
So
is.
you would have 2 up front and a back.
That's correct.
Okay. And could you tell us why you need to raise your sign?
That's an operational question for Glenn.
I mean, that's the look we have in the current locations. We'd like to try to maintain it. I didn't bring a plan with this. Oh, thank you. But put it there. I mean, that's a little bit of a rough design, and in the other locations, we have a tower and we have the sign there. So
What is the height of that?
27 feet.
The bottom of the sign is 27 feet?
The top of the sign is 27 feet.
Okay.
And the building, in this plan, the way you see it here, we will be tearing the 3rd floor off of the house. If you've gone by that house, you know what it looks like. We will be tearing the roof off and tearing the 3rd floor off, which is where we save the square feet relative to the parking.
And if you put the sign in according to code, where would it be?
Code is 15 feet, so it would be
So about where would
probably
that
about
be?
the height of the 2nd floor windows would be my guess, Chairman.
About the middle pane there, the 2nd floor?
Yeah, my guess would be right there.
Right there?
Yeah.
What's the board's thoughts?
Really not for us to decide. I mean, that's
Well, it's a zoning issue.
Yeah, so we
Yeah,
don't
it's a-
really,
Yeah,
we're not
yeah,
gonna,
I'm just trying to answer the chairman's question.
yeah, I don't really think we need to comment on that. It's not really up to us.
Is it possible, I guess anything's possible, but I mean, is it realistic to rearrange the backyard so that, or the back behind the building, so that there aren't any parking places in front of the building? I see you've got a pad that might be moved over.
No, there's not sufficient space to allow us to add the 2 parking spaces, which it's effectively 3 because we have the handicap landing zone too. There's just not sufficient room in the rear to get that in and allow for the proper circulation for vehicles in the rear of the building. I do, though, want to note that your traffic engineer, and I may be getting ahead of myself, pointed out that any parking area has to be located no closer than 20 feet from the right-of-way line. This plan complies with that in respect that it's located more than 20 feet from the current right-of-way, 60 feet along West Lancaster Avenue. Amy points out that we should plan for an 80-foot ultimate right-of-way, which effectively means that that right-of-way along the property sign has to move up 10 feet. We can still make that adjustment and fit those parking spaces in there, maintaining the 20-foot setback.
The sign is a zoning thing, and we're making a recommendation for zoning. So I think we need to give our thoughts on the height of the sign. We've had signs come in from Villanova that we had to make a comment on. So how do you feel? Could we have that picture back up of the facade? Sorry about that.
Set back considerably from.
Yeah. Oh, we do? Okay.
And there's, as Chuck pointed out, some existing vegetation along the front that kind of buffers the front of it, so it is hard to see the building.
Oh, yes.
Will there be vegetation in front of those two parking spots that kind of buffer that as well? I know you have the trees, but do you have anything planned that's lower?
We've seen some schematic, in conversation with our landscape architect, there will be some additional
Like
ground
lower.
cover, flowers, shrubs
Okay.
put up there, something certainly to neaten it up a bit. I mean,
Sure.
the bank is very interested in having this look attractive and
Sure.
welcoming to its guests.
How big will the trees be in front on the setback?
Well, they're two existing 18-inch ones.
You can see that.
Yeah, I don't know if we can,
So it's not a sight line issue?
I'm sorry?
It's not a sight line issue?
It is
going
not.
Ingress egress onto?
No, it's not. They're set back far enough so that they don't interfere with the exiting maneuvers. And actually Debbie just put up an aerial, and I don't know how clearly this is going to come through, but
We have that in our
there
package.
you go. So you can see what those trees look like from an orthoscopic view.
I don't know where this is going to show up. Sorry. So that's one of the trees, the existing trees now. So they're pretty, sorry. They're pretty mature. And we would have flower beds around the two trees at the landscape architect's suggestion so that we can preserve the roots and not have them get damaged by mowers. You hear that? You hear that?
Yep. Are there any additional comments from the audience or questions? No? All right. Why don't we go through these points individually and decide whether we agree with the three zoning
We also,
individually?
if you have any questions from our traffic consultant, he did an analysis of the queuing and determined that what was being proposed would be sufficient for the site. So he's happy to answer any questions
Okay.
you may have about that.
Thank you. Amy, did you have any thoughts on the queuing?
Unfortunately, my packet did not include the queue analysis, so, and they were able to provide it to me on, I think, Friday, and I just haven't had an opportunity to go in and look at it. I don't know if Guy wants to answer some questions that I haven't had an opportunity to look at. One of the things, I looked very briefly at it while we've been sitting here, and one of the things that I would be wondering is if the hours that I understand you spoke to the, maybe the managers of the branches that you did your analysis at to find out when their peak was, but I was wondering how it translated to the ITE hours. I know that sometimes it'll tell you the AM peak hour of the generator, Saturday peak hour of the generator, PM peak hour of the generator. It'll give you a general idea of when those generator peak hours are occurring. Do you know if the ITE books identified that or not, or if you looked at that? And it's okay if they didn't. I'm just curious.
Right. Just for the board, so awareness, Guy DiMartino with Traffic Planning and Design. These branches, the two branches that currently exist have common hours. They're consistent between the two branches, and it's anticipated they'd be the same for this proposed branch. So in the morning, the existing branches don't even open during the typical
Right.
commuter time period. They open at 9 a.m., generally after commuter traffic has lessened. Saturday, based on ITE, has the highest trip generation for a bank. This specific branch, or this specific bank, is only open from 9 a.m. to noon, so a 3-hour period. So it's very limited. We evaluated 2 of those 3 hours. So I'm pretty confident that we captured, we studied from 10 a.m. to noon on the Saturday, and in all likelihood, I'm pretty confident that that's captures the peak, where the peak wouldn't have occurred between 9 and 10 a.m. on a Saturday.
All right. I'm just really concerned about the fact that you only have queuing, an area to handle 2 vehicles and maybe a little bit more before you start moving into the operations of vehicles entering your site. And that would be my only concern.
I'm going to add to Amy's comment. So understanding why you have the circulation the way you do, because on the western side, there's not enough room. But if you stack now, more so than you predict, you end up in Lancaster Avenue. If it was, if the drive-through was on the western side and you stacked, you go back to your parking lot. It's not a big issue. But I can see why you don't have the room to do what you need to do. But that is a concern we have. We've discussed it, that should there be a crunch, if you will, you're going to have cars either not being able to get in off of Lancaster Avenue or back to Lancaster Avenue.
And understanding on the bank user, this data we collected at these various existing branches showed very limited traffic generation for these for this bank. I think on average, we evaluated the 2 existing branches twice, 2 times during 2 different time periods. Weekday midday, Friday afternoon, and then Friday evening, as well as Saturday. And on average, over a 2-hour window for each of those 4 evaluations, there was 5 people using the drive-through over a 2-hour period. There's one
Where are the other branches?
One in Westchester on Paoli Pike, and the other one in Exton on Route 100. So during those evaluations, during each 2-hour window that we evaluated for those 2 branches, so we did it 4 times. On average, there was 5 drive-through users over a 2-hour period. During that time, so 8 hours of observations, we only saw a drive-through queue of 2 vehicles twice during those 8 hours that we were on site.
Is this a full-service commercial bank? In other words, do you take commercial deposits, or is it primarily like a savings and loan type of bank?
No, we're a commercial bank. We have limited consumer. We're not really a big consumer lender, so it's basically, and we have a lot of remote deposit capture machines at the locations of the businesses, so we just don't have people stacking up in the drive-up because we just don't have that customer base.
You don't take cash deposits?
Oh, yeah, we do.
From retail customers? Or
We do, but even retail customers don't have a lot of cash. The old days of having a lot of restaurants having a lot of cash.
But they still have to carry it in.
It's all credit cards. Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of cash. It's more contractors that have cash now, and it's more going out to pay employees and things like that than it is coming in.
The 2 other branches you have, the
Yes.
neighborhoods, are they similar to the Lancaster Avenue?
No, they're large. Both of them were former old Fidelities, and one's 5,000 square feet and the other's 3,500 square feet.
No, I don't mean the physical plan, I meant the neighborhoods. Are they
Oh,
similar?
oh, absolutely, yes.
I mean, are they more residential, more
Yeah,
foot
we have,
traffic?
in Exton, we
'Cause
have a
you're not going to get a
neighbor.
lot of foot traffic here.
No, we understand that.
Yeah.
And in Exton, there's a Wawa on the opposite side of the street, and we have a residential neighborhood behind us. In Westchester, we have a residential property right next to us. So we're used to fitting into the neighborhood and making sure that the neighbors are happy.
How about the street that you front on? Is it
In Westchester, we're fronting right on Paoli Pike, and then we have a private lane. In Exton, it's a residential street that accesses Route 100.
where is your teller window in the building? If you
Kind
could
of
point it
depending
out
on
on
when we
the
answer
footprint.
this question, we'll figure that out. The teller line's probably going to be along here in the back addition. You'd have a cash room. Banks don't have vaults anymore. So the addition would be the teller line would run about down this way, and you'd have your teller window in there.
Can you move the teller window further back so you could pick up another car?
That is possible, yeah. We intentionally haven't designed the building because we needed to address these civil questions first. We think tearing off the existing building and squaring it up and giving us that bigger building that we could stack with will help us in that design. So as long as we can get the cars in this part of the world, back on the bypass lane, that's definitely a possibility.
But the problem is if it stacks out on Lancaster, I don't think we're as concerned about getting them to the back there. If you could move the teller window further back, you would pick up space for another car.
I don't know whether it's a full car, but maybe, yeah.
Well, right now, it sounds like you have 2.5.
What's that?
Right now, it sounds like you have 2.5.
you know, Chuck's told us it's 3, so I'm going to let Chuck talk.
We used, and Glenn's right, we used a per vehicle length for stacking of 20 feet. Amy in her letter points out that ITE would prefer you use 25 feet. One of the things that does come to mind as discussion is going is we were purposely trying to be cognizant of the geometry of this entranceway because of that existing tree we're hoping to save. This actually could be moved back and more paving, and I still think we could certainly meet the township zoning requirement, but we could basically use striping as opposed to actual limits of paving to help guide that and provide the additional stacking. So I think there is probably something that can be done there. Again, the reason that we have it shown that way is an attempt to try to save that existing tree, which we know the township's all for when you have an existing mature tree, especially along Lancaster Avenue.
Can I just, quick question? On the side of the building, forgive my directions are kind of screwy here, but I'm looking at the picture, to the left, on the left side of the building, is there going to be like an ATM type of? It's not going to be any, all the drive-in is going to be on the right side of the building?
Right, that existing bump out is a feature of the existing building.
How wide will that be, roughly?
The lane?
The lane,
The lane
yeah.
is 12 feet wide. It's actually a little, we're showing it being a little bit wider than it is right now because the building is where it is, so we don't have a lot of room to work, so it's one way.
Because what's throwing me off is the 3 handicap spaces in front of the building.
It's actually 1 handicap space, 1 normal space, and then 1 landing area. So we have a van accessible handicap parking area, which requires an 8-foot landing area and an 8-foot space, and then your township ordinance requires 9.5-foot width for standard parking with 20-foot depth.
Okay, but there's not going to be any operations whatsoever on that side of the building? Everything is going to be on the right side of the building?
Correct.
Yeah, if you have a handicap van, will you have the proper turning radius, both ingress and egress into that spot?
Yeah, the township's ordinance requires that for parking areas with 90-degree parking, you have an aisle width that's at least 22 feet, which is that's why we set the parking spaces to the east a little bit so that we actually have 22 foot to allow maneuverability.
Okay.
Why are you saving this building?
That's a good question. We originally started out on the premise that we would save the building from a land development stand, thinking that we would potentially have the process be easier. But, you know, I mean, we like the site, so we're up for thinking about anything that you guys think makes sense.
Just based on this?
Yeah.
There's not much of the original building left.
You'd be surprised. The 2 buildings that we've done, the existing, we've actually renovated the existing structures that were there. In Exton, we actually didn't do land development. We just actually got a permit. And in West Goshen, we did the same thing. We renovated the existing building. It looks materially different, but the original building and the walls are there.
But you're saving it is making it more complicated to comply, right?
Not going to disagree about that.
Yeah.
Down. You could move the whole thing east, and then all your drive-throughs would be on the west side. You could stack more cars.
Not going to disagree with you about that. I mean, we're still in our due diligence period. We're here for this kind of direction. We like the site. We love the township. We have a lot of customers down here already. You know, if you're saying take the building down and the process is the same, then we're going to kind of go in that direction and probably make it work a little faster.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, you should be okay. I mean, just looking at the side yards, you know, you're not really going to have a rear yard problem nor a front yard problem.
Take it down.
Yeah, I mean, there's the setback.
Take it down.
Yeah, the setback requirement, I'll do my best to speak. The setback requirement is 65 feet from the right-of-way. If we have to then take that 65 feet from the ultimate right-of-way, you can see the setback line actually goes into the building as it is now. That setback line would move back another 10 feet, which means that if we had to do a tear down and replace, everything's got to move back to, and now we don't, it kind of limits our flexibility even more, unless the
And then
town's-
it requires more parking in the front because,
So you can kind of
yeah,
see
it's
it's.
not
we're
really,
kind of
it's
working at
not really
odds against what
winning
we're
you
trying to achieve.
anything.
But, and just throw this out there, to your point about saving the building, making it more complicated, if during the discussions it's determined that, you know, the current front building line could be respected and everything can happen beyond that, then I think it gives the bank a
Yeah,
little
well,
bit more
that's,
flexibility.
that would, zoning would have to do that.
I agree.
Right,
Agreed.
and that's like, you're gonna do a trade-off. It's, you know, you give and you get in most instances. So by solving 5 problems, you go in for 1 instead of 7. And you got probably a better shot. That doesn't mean they're gonna give it to you, but at least you got a better shot.
Agreed. I mean, we want to be as practical-minded about this as we can moving forward, but while understanding what the rules and regulations are.
Yeah, I just don't think it's a good approach to have a stacking problem in Lancaster Avenue. If you have a stacking problem on your own site, well, that's kind of your problem, but.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean,
Yeah.
I think you're gonna get, I don't, if I was on the zoning board, I probably wouldn't give it to you.
Yeah. You're not
you
even
know.
close. Yeah, yeah.
But I
it's-
do understand your point in that banking is very different these days. Do you really need a drive-through, or could you have 3 angled parking spots that are just right up against the building there? I mean, would that make more sense for you? Just like have cars that can basically be at the doorstep, get out and do their ATM or whatever, a window? I don't know. Then do you have handicap issues? I
Yeah,
don't know.
I think then people are gonna do the same thing. I
If they were angled parking spaces, there's
Yeah.
no queue. You have to go park in the back if those spots are taken.
Yeah, but I think what the problem, I would see the problem, the same thing as like stacking. I think when people came in and saw the cars there, I think it's going to deter them coming in quicker. You know what I mean? They're going to be stacking there, and it's almost going to be like, oh, maybe they're going to move. or
Well,
they'll
it would just be
more
parking
tentative getting
spaces. You
in.
wouldn't wait behind a parking space. You would just go park in the rear.
Right, if I can, in our existing locations, we intentionally, like in Exton, put 3 parking spaces right in the front and put the handicap and put railings in because of the grade, because those 3 spots are the only ones that are ever used. We have a handicap in front and 3 in and out spots, and those 4 spots, that's all the customers ever use. I mean, the days of kind of coming and staying all day, they just don't exist. You run in, boom, sometimes you just leave your bag and you go and you pick it up the next day. So there was a design that we had that had sort of the in and out spots in the front. We think that this location needs some kind of in-car service of some kind. So we're, you know, if we have a stacking problem, and I know that Gilmore said to reverse it, we'd have to look at that, reverse the flow a little bit.
Based on your other locations, you
This would work. This would absolutely work, based on what our experience is.
And I don't doubt that. I don't. I think that you're probably right. But the former zoning board member has spoken.
No, I'm not there anymore. I'm just.
Right,
I'm
but
only
you know
kinda
the
telling
mindset. You know
that
the
if
mindset.
If you come in and ask, and I were still on the board, and you asked me for a variance for 10 stacking sites, I would say slim and none, and Slim's left the country. I just don't. You know? No, but I
They're
kinda
worse
think-
now.
I kind of think they're going to do the same thing.
Yeah.
And your problem is, that's why I'd asked a question about your other neighborhoods. I think your problem here is that I think this is going to give you a few more cars coming in than normal, just because of the activities and how downtown Wayne operates. I think that more people are going to want to come in, do their thing in their car, and be on the way. I think you're, and again, I don't know. I think you're best served by moving the building over, and then stacking them. Then you've got more room. Then you're stacking in the back, you're stacking on the side. But I think the real problem here is not so much the stacking as it is where the stacking potentially could occur. And that's the problem. You need to clear Lancaster Avenue for anybody slowing down or waiting for somebody to cut through your side. And that's just, we always have this discussion about traffic.
Yeah,
on Lancaster Avenue.
I think I hear what you're saying, is that basically it's not the stacking that's the issue. It's if it goes wrong so severely that it's
Yes.
just too much of a gamble.
It's already exists, you know, across the street or just diagonal to the Wayne Ballet. I experienced it tonight dropping off my daughters. There's just the queuing at 5 o'clock where you have maximum classes there. It's going to be an issue.
Yeah, I might think a little bit differently of it if this design maintained the residential aspect of what's sitting there, but there's really, this new building that you're contemplating is not at all residential, at least not in the scheme, not that I can see as I'm looking. In fact, I'm wondering why you're even keeping the bump out on that western side. So you might be better advised to go back to the drawing board and see if you can't come up with a new building that would maximize the benefits of the property. It may not be possible, but I think it's worth taking a look at.
The building that's there now is a commercial building. It was.
I understand that. I'm just really saying that there's a trade-off here between maintaining the existing building and the benefits that you can get out of that in developing it into what you want to have there. It has to be weighed against the downsides that have been discussed here. You have to weigh that. We're not really in a position to do that. It's not our job to do that. We're just based on the things we've seen here in the past. I'm recommending that you go back and take a hard look at giving yourself a new building. Since I don't see, it may not work out that way, but I'm hearing enough from the board and from our staff that may be the way to go here.
Yeah, I agree also, because, yeah, the three variances that you're asking for, the only one that I could see easily going through would be the fence height in the back, because you're protecting the neighbors back there, which is kind of a no-brainer. But you're not even close on the stacking. And the sign, I think you would have a problem with also, the height, based on what I've seen in the past.
The location of it?
The height. Because if we give it to you, then we have to give it to the next guy.
Yeah.
Not
necessarily.
Yeah, but that's the way
There's
it
no
does around
hardship.
here.
There's no reason, other than that's what you do in other places, that you need to prove some kind of hardship, and there's no hardship. I mean, you're 60 feet off the street. The last time we moved the sign up was the place was 600 feet off the street, and they needed to be higher. Remember that one, Ken? I just don't. I don't see the hardship why the sign has to be 27 feet in the air.
There is some existing vegetation there that blocks the visibility of the building.
But that could be
Well,
modified.
that'll help you if you make it lower. Then you won't have the vegetation problem.
So Kathy, I would recommend that the board kind of get their ideas together and put it in
Move
a
forward. Okay.
in a little motion that you could make a recommendation. This board needs to make a recommendation if it chooses to the zoning board.
Okay.
With recommending whether to give or to not give the variances and any suggested conditions.
Would somebody like to tackle that?
Yeah, I'll try. I move that we grant their variance for the fence. The stacking is a problem that I think needs to be addressed, and two-car stacking off of Lancaster Avenue is, in our opinion, is not satisfactory. Also, the height of the sign needs to be reduced, similar to what is necessary for facilities as such.
And do you want to add the comment that they might consider putting a new building in place of trying to work with the constraints of this?
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't
That's
really know
something
that we
would
need to
That's
do
kind
that,
of-
yeah.
I think we're kind of saying that by telling them they can't do the things we're telling
Yeah.
them.
I would just reword that to say, because how did you, I think we're just weighing in, we're not,
Right.
Yeah.
so we're just,
I'm
our
recommending
thoughts-
that they don't grant the variance for sign height, and they don't grant the variance for.
so we don't support, it would be a good way to say, it.
Right.
We're
Yeah.
not supportive of those
Yes.
two waivers. We're
Yes.
supporting of the other.
All right.
They're
Is
variances.
there a second on that?
Thank you.
All right.
It's
All
getting
the,
late.
yes.
Question just before you take a final vote. With respect to the stacking, I've certainly heard all your concerns and understand them. Would that recommendation, would it be correct to modify the recommendation to indicate that the reduced stacking towards Lancaster Avenue is your concern as opposed to stacking in the other direction?
I think that's kind of how you said it.
Yeah, I did say
Yeah.
that. I thought I had said that.
That's what
you
was
know,
the intention there.
Because of the stacking coming off of Lancaster Avenue, it's not an acceptable thing for us.
Right.
I kind of left you the door that if you move the building and you stacked on the west side
Right.
as opposed to the east side,
Our
That
primary
would that's
concern is
more-
where the stacking would be.
That's more palatable, I think, for the zoning board to deal with than to try and stack off on Lancaster Avenue.
Fair enough.
Not
In my
blocking
opinion.
traffic.
Thank you.
All right, are we clear on that
Second.
then? It's been moved in second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
One last question,
Yes.
if I may. Mr. Falcone, I did appear before you when you were on the zoning hearing board for a couple applications. So I'm just going to take your temperature here, and I know you might not want to answer this directly, and you may not be able to, but going back to the comment about maintaining that building front as it is now, you know, if we do demolish and move the whole building over, is that something
This
that-
front, you mean? Or the front
No,
is existing?
The location of the front wall for the existing
See,
structure.
And again, I'm just speaking for me, and,
Understood.
you know, with 25 cents, you can't buy coffee.
I get it.
I'd be more prone, okay, to say, since you're doing all these other things, I think that would be okay with me. Because you're really addressing the more serious issues, and it is somewhat of a hardship because of the 65-foot and the size of the lot and things like that, but your solicitors, you know, your lawyer should be able to handle that.
Understood. I just, thank you for your opinion. It's non-binding. I just appreciate your feedback. Thank you.
All right. Doesn't look like there's any public comment because there's no public here, unless you would like to say something. Okay, is there any old business? No. Any new business? Thank you.
Thank you.
If not, then the meeting's adjourned.